Good afternoon, good morning. Hello, everyone that is already in today's session. The webinar for today, no more email ping pong, frictionless supplier intake, onboarding and TPRM. My name is Sam Jenks. I'll be your host for today. My AirPods have died, so I hope that this old school wired headphone will be okay. I'm not trying to be a performative male, I promise. I'm just trying to be able to make sure that everybody can hear me okay. With that being said, we're going to wait a few moments till the top of the hour to allow additional people that are going to be joining to join in. You can already see within the chat that there is a chat function. So if you have questions during today's session, feel free to leave those in the chat function. Our team will make sure to be able to mark those as questions, and we'll get around to them during the Q&A. Do also make sure to keep your voting fingers ready, because we will have some different polls during today's session. The polls, of course, are going to be able to gauge different things such as maturity, but also just kind of some of the takeaways from those people that are in today's session as well. At any point in time, again, if you'd like to be able to ask a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. You do not need to wait until the Q&A, although we will have a Q&A at the end of the session. And like I said, we'll just wait a moment more as the people that are joining at the top of the hour here start to join into today's session. So we'll get started in just a moment's time. Lovely. Starting to see that more people are joining in, which is great to see. As I just mentioned to those that were in the session a few moments earlier than the top of the hour, feel free to drop any questions that you guys have during today's session in the chat line. We'll be able to make sure to get around to those during today's session. I am going to be your host today. Hello, those that are not familiar with me, Sam Jenks. I am the SRM advisor as well as CRO at Kodiak Hub. It's always nice, of course, in my opinion, to be able to get the session started before we get into today's agenda, which we're going to get into in just a moment. Let's try and warm up the chat here. And it's always nice to be able to hear where people are calling in from. I know that we had some different attendees that were signing up from the United States, some from the UK, some from the DACH region, some from mainland Europe. So I can start here. I am currently based myself out of Stockholm, Sweden. So feel free to drop in the chat line where it is that you're joining us in from today. It's always nice to be able to understand where everybody's joining in from. And also, of course, to make sure that you get familiar with the chat function before we get into the day's session as well. Sandefjord. Hello, Martin. Nice to have you. I've been to Sandefjord a few times, which is very nice. Maybe you're working at Jotun is potential. Warwickshire, hello, Joe. Here in Germany, Oliver, hello, hello. Come on, don't be shy. I know that I see that there's plenty more people in attendance today. Feel free to drop. Richard from Hull, hello. Nice to see you. Richard from Stockholm, hello, hello. Poland in the house, fantastic. That's actually where one of our offices is, our innovation hub. Ohio in the States. Howdy, hello. Kalmar, Sweden. Hello, Don. Fantastic. Well, I'm sure that now everybody understands how the chat function works. As we mentioned, feel free to drop anything in the chat that you have as far as questions during today's session, and we'll make sure to mark those questions during today's session and get around to them during the end of the session, which is the Q&A. It's going to be the last kind of 5 to 10 minutes of the session. The runtime for today's session is going to be anywhere between 40 to 50 minutes, depending upon engagement during the Q&A, as well as also during the live demo session, which will be kind of the last 10 minutes of the session session prior to the Q&A as far as how long that will take as well. Like I said, again, get your voting fingers ready. We're going to have some polls during today's session, which is always great to have people to be able to respond upon. So please do engage when we drop those in the session. Let's get into today's agenda then in that case. As we see, we're going to first take a quick glance at Kodiak. This session, though, is not going to be about Kodiak specifically. For the majority of it, we're going to talk a lot more about Kodiak's space, which is SRM. And I know that that's what everybody is here to be able to discuss. And I want to start by setting the scene, talking about what we see as some of the key success factors within our customers that really truly win with supplier relationship management and create scenarios where they have frictionless supplier intake, onboarding, and TPRM. And beyond that, of course, also with quality management and performance management of their supplier base. I want to also set the scene a little bit of what I think that most of us are up against, which is the status quo within supplier management. Many of us experience it, multiple different systems, homegrown, filling the gaps in between the ERP and our TPRM solutions and trying to be able to utilize different types of Excel spreadsheets and SharePoints and the like to be able to get the job done. But of course, it's a big job to be done. And that, of course, has a cost. What we're going to also talk a little bit about is the cost of inaction. We recognize from our customers as well as those prospective customers that we're working with and advising that it's tough to get budget for supplier relationship management technology. We want to take a moment to be able to quantify some of those costs that are then piling up, which we like to talk about as the silent tax on your business, which of course we can be able to also provide you guys with some levers to potentially pull in a future business case that you would be building. We're going to then get into a demo of Kodiak Hub's supplier intake, onboarding, and TPRM functionality. We do have broader capabilities at Kodiak Hub related to supplier information management, quality management, as well as then also, of course, performance management. With that being said, we're going to focus primarily on these particular use cases today, as this is then the primary topic for today is frictionless intake, onboarding, and TPRM. So let's get into things then. For those of you that are not familiar with Kodiak Hub, we are a supplier relationship management solution provider headquartered out of Stockholm, Sweden, with our offices based out of the UK, DACH region in Munich, Germany, as well as then also the Polish Innovation Hub. And we also then have our headquarters in the US in Boston, Massachusetts. We have over 120 customers across the globe. We are a customer favorite that is listed in ProcureTech 100 for 4 years running. We've been the only solution provider within the SRM space to be 4 years running in the ProcureTech 100. And I'm saying, of course, we're a customer favorite, but don't just take it from us. Go and check us out on G2, Capterra, and other review sites where people, of course, have been able to provide their own, thoughts on our solution, as well as our use cases or case studies, that exist within our website. So you could be able to hear a little bit more from your peers as to what they think about Kodiak Hub. Our solution is a modular one. It's the solution in the suite of modules that you see on screen here. We're going to focus a little bit in on our solution today during today's demonstration. Like I mentioned, that will happen towards the end of the session to show off some of our intake, onboarding, and TPRM capabilities. The solution itself is a modular one, which allows our customers to treat it as a box of chocolates, right? The beautiful thing about that is it allows our customers to pick and choose the different modules as they see fit to be able to fill their requirements and needs and then scale into the solution over time. But also it allows our customers, of course, to be able to apply the solution as a full suite if they need to. The hub is where you have your single source of truth for supplier information, data and document management, supplier scorecards. That's also where you can be able to manage different types of workflows for approvals and communication and collaboration with suppliers, but also internally as well. This, of course, is a pretty essential element to qualification and DD, and of course, the intake and onboarding, which we're going to talk about today. Some of those other capabilities that are essential to third-party risk management are on the left-hand side. Here, for example, we work via third parties that are licensed via us and natively integrated into our platform. Everything from country risk to sanctions and PEP, financial credit ratings, and media monitoring. Ongoing monitoring, able to be notified about these things and the like. The beautiful thing about this is that we don't in any way, shape, or form say you have to use our providers. You can also bring your own license, which you see at the bottom of the screen there is one of our classic integration capabilities, is bringing your own license, as well as then pushing and pulling data from an ERP, as Kodiak typically sits as kind of the layer on top of the transactional data that sits in the ERP as the relationship layer for data. And a lot of that relationship related data is captured on the right-hand side. These particular modules are there to augment and automate processes to create excellence from everything from registration and intake to self-assessment and onboarding to audits and performance evaluation. As I mentioned, we're going to focus in on some of these capabilities today, primarily on intake, onboarding, and TPRM. We are trusted by great customers globally. We love our customers. To those of you that are in attendance that are in our customer base, thank you very much for your trust and for continuing to drive us forward as we continue to drive ourselves forward as well. So I want to start today's session with a quick poll to get the polls warmed up. And I'm always curious as to where people's maturity is within the space of supplier relationship management, both within maybe programs in your business, but also your supplier relationship management technology. So please take a second to be able to respond. And I know that one or two customers that maybe are in attendance are going to say that they're mature, which is fantastic. With that being said, for the other ones that are in today's session, where are you currently? Are you just in an awareness phase, gaining a high level understanding of what SRM can be able to do for you? Are you currently educating and building momentum in your business as to what SRM can be able to provide? Are you selecting, actively looking for an SRM solution to be able to choose something? Or maybe you mature already and you've adopted something like Kodiak Hub, or are looking to adopt a new solution like Kodiak Hub, but already have a solution in place as well. Curious to be able to hear from those that are in attendance today. Take a moment to be able to fill out, as you see here, the poll. We'll leave that poll up for just a moment more. And 5, 4, 3. All right, and we will stop the poll there. So it seems as the majority of those in attendance are in a phase where they're mainly just gaining an understanding and also building momentum internally. Thank you, of course, for responding on this particular session. This is in no way, shape, or form something that you need to be shy about and not a problem whatsoever. Hopefully, we'll be able to arm you guys with the ammunition, the language, the information that you need to be able to understand, is SRM a technology and a program for you that would be important to kick off as well. And hopefully, in a lot of ways, start to be able to build some more momentum in your businesses as well. Let's get into today's content then and talk a little bit about some of the success factors to adopting supplier relationship management that we've seen across our customers, particularly within this new area, which is, of course, an AI native era. And I think that the classic model of people, process, and technology, PPT, that has been around forever, that still stands true. There is, however, two new concepts that I think are emerging within this model, which is, of course, culture, being able to move fast, break things, and fail, and not, of course, being the classic risk management and risk, of course, averse capability that the procurement professionals that we all know and love typically possess. And also to be able to make sure that you have a proper data architecture. Garbage in, garbage out. Everybody has heard this time and time again, but it's more essential now than ever before to be able to not only make sense of course, a single source of truth for your structured data, but also for unstructured data to be able to make sense of that as well. I want to myself actually deep dive, though, on two particular areas that I think are pretty essential to the success factors of supplier relationship management, particularly in an AI native era, particularly as well related back to supplier intake, onboarding, and TPRM, and creating a mode of operating, but also a model that is a bit more frictionless to be able to remove some of the status quo, remove some of the manual, heavy, I would say, kind of administrative burden that a lot of teams are experiencing, and ultimately move to a place that is a lot more AI native, a lot more automated, a lot more augmented. And this starts with the process. And I want to dive into process from two different perspectives. First, from a perspective of the operating model, I think that everybody has been hearing procurement is experiencing a shift in the operating model. But what does that really mean? And the second part of the process is identifying a process that is cutting out the BS and really focusing on the things that are most important to be able to get down to business. So let's talk first about the operating model. When I look at the operating model of supplier relationship management, I think that the most important thing is to do one thing in particular, which is 3 steps. And this is eliminate, delegate, and automate. And this might sound simple, but I think that this particular framework can actually be applied across the source to pay landscape, providing you guys with a very simple framework to be able to determine, are we taking something that is an old and manual workflow and simply just trying to automate it? Or are we trying to win by redesigning? And I think that those that will win in this next era of procure tech and AI means that they will dare to redesign their operating model, whether it's related to supplier relationship management, but maybe your P2P is broken. Maybe something on source to contract is broken. Do not settle for something that feels broken or overly manual, because the chances are that you can eliminate, delegate, and automate elements of those tasks. Now, what does this mean in the context of supplier relationship management? Well, for eliminating, it means removing the approval and handoff steps that exist only because of legacy management layers, different types of escalation paths or emails, ping pong that is going back and forth, that is unnecessary, that is, for example, today, very manual administrative, because it's part of the process, so to say. You should be looking to build frameworks and different types of platforms that give more visibility to the organization, so you don't need to have these additional handoff steps in this more manual manner. Delegate. What does that mean? Well, if you can delegate manual administrative tasks to the suppliers themselves, and or, for example, to a system to be able to automate or augment, then do so. And the last piece is automate. And of course, this means that you need to try and take the steps that you've identified and automate things as much as possible, reduce the friction that happens with manual re-entry and chasing down vendors when it comes to supplier onboarding and intake, and trying, of course, to be able to work in a way that has less manual burden. Now, what does this also require? Well, it requires to be able to have a good, solid approach to the process of managing a supplier lifecycle. And at Kodiak, we like to be able to propose to our customers that they look over their current process and try and, again, eliminate and simplify as much of those steps as possible. We ourselves look at the lifecycle management of suppliers in a very simplified manner, as you see on screen here. Why? Is because this is eliminating the BS and focusing on how can we be able to automate the busy work, particularly within those first 3 elements as you see on screen there: intake, TPRM, and onboarding, but additionally within supplier assessment and ongoing assessment, as well as then also the work related to reviewing, approving, and qualifying suppliers as well. And we're going to come back to this particular model. And of course, if you stick around, then we're going to be able to you're going to be able to download some of these particular slides as well if you would like some inspiration. So no need to take any screenshots or things of that sort. You're going to get the content. But from our perspective, the most important thing is that supplier relationship management as a process, as an operating model, becomes more lifecycle focused. From the moment that you manage intake, so that you're cutting down on maverick spend, to the moment that you're gauging different types of third-party risk, of course, to be able to understand, are there reputational risks, financial risks, macro level risks, industry risks, so forth and so on, to onboarding a vendor, capturing master data, feeding that master data, for example, back into ERP with not via manual entry, but actual API that is pulling and pushing data as you're seeing fit, so that you're able to create good golden records within your master data. And then, of course, ongoing management of the vendor base as well for assessment and qualification, audits, corrective actions, and performance. Really, this model is linear, but when it's all said and done, it's actually circular, right? Because from the moment that we intake a vendor to driving forward performance, we want to continue to have a performance loop that is improving over time, and therefore giving you guys an opportunity to manage the supplier in a full life cycle. These are the different areas that Kodiak covers, and these are the areas that we believe are most essential to be covered by a supplier relationship management program, but also by a supplier relationship management technology such as Kodiak Hub. I think that this is part of the focus, right? The process, the operating model, which is then, again, to go back, eliminating, delegating, and automating. And the second piece of that is to be able to focus on what is the actual end-to-end process of managing a supplier. Now, there's a lot of intricacies to the actual flows, multi-stakeholder approvals, different types of checkpoints and thresholds that a supplier needs to be able to go through. And we recognize that this changes from industry to industry, vertical to vertical, based upon different types of requirements or customer requirements, government requirements, different types of legislative requirements. But nonetheless, simplifying and finding a process that works for you is an essential step within this. The second piece of that I wanted to be able to deep dive into, again, of the 5 success factors is the technology. And I think that more so the technology itself, this requires a mindset shift across the source to pay lifecycle. Source to pay has long been seen as source to contract, purchase to pay. In a modern ecosystem, source to pay is a lot different. Source to pay is broken down into its own different subsets. And this particular model is one that I love to be able to go back to because I think that it shows, for example, how source to pay has evolved, but also the ecosystem of source to pay solutions has evolved as well. And SRM within this particular model is giving our customers an opportunity to be able to look at supplier relationship management as an integrated lifecycle approach, start to finish. Intake all the way to driving performance, just in the same way that you source all the way to making an actual payment, to your suppliers. Just in the same way that your ERP is managing the data from the second that you onboard a new supplier to when you're receiving goods, and of course actually making sense of those particular goods, whether that be in your manufacturing cycle or in the services that you're providing, so forth and so on. So what does that ecosystem look like today? Well, that ecosystem is a lot more integrated. And supplier relationship management is end-to-end, focused on a lifecycle approach. But within that, it also means that you have the opportunities to be able to not only integrate your SRM layer with your source to pay and your ERP layer, but you also have the opportunity to be able to integrate your TPRM into a supplier relationship management platform. The big challenge that I think that a lot of customers run into here is that they say, we need financial checks, we need sanctions checks, and they run out and they get a new provider. Well, that's fantastic. Rapid Ratings, Credit Safe, Dun & Bradstreet, awesome solutions, of course, for different types of credit insights. Moody's, fantastic solution for sanctions. EcoVadis, awesome for ESG. Now, the problem there, though, is that it creates interface fatigue. It creates a lot of different surface area that businesses need to be able to kind of, I would say, jump around to when they're actually going to manage intake, onboarding, and third-party risk management of a vendor. What if that could be able to be in a single pane of glass? What if those insights could be able to be surfaced based upon inputs of simple information and ultimately create a 360-degree view of the supplier risk, compliance, quality, and performance all in one place? Well, this, of course, is what Kodiak can be able to provide and what most, in our opinion, supplier relationship management solutions should be able to provide as well. And the last element that I want to be able to hit on here when it comes to technology is that there is a shift, I think, within the language. Supplier relationship management is its own space, right? And supplier relationship management, to be clear, is not just supplier information management. With that being said, supplier relationship management should include supplier information management. And this means, of course, master data management and segmentation, onboarding and information collection, data governance and records. With that being said, SRM is a lifecycle approach focused on risk, compliance, and ESG, supplier quality, performance, collaboration, improvements, and ongoing actions. Again, a lifecycle approach and a lifecycle that is continuing, not just linear, but actually secular in a lot of ways. So process, technology, 2 very important points for us to be able to discuss. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the day-to-day that probably exists in a lot of businesses that are in attendance today, the status quo. And I'm always curious of understanding, what does your world look like before we get into the session about, for example, what Kodiak is able to offer when it comes to intake, onboarding, and TPRM? And what I love to be able to understand is how many different solutions are you currently utilizing to be able to manage the supplier lifecycle today? Supplier information management, intake, onboarding, third-party risk management, due diligence, qualification, quality management, performance, you name it. If you would take 1 second to be able to answer the poll that is on screen right now, that has just gotten started, how many different tools and interfaces that is potentially, of course, having to jump between different interfaces are you utilizing today? Is it all in one? Is it more than 5? 1 to 3, 3 to 5? Take a second to answer now. Fantastic. Thank you guys for taking the time to answer. I see that votes are rolling in. Continue on here, and we're going to continue on with the session's content. So what it looks like here is that the majority of people in attendance are sitting within 1 to 3 different solutions, whereas it seems as if it's kind of split down the middle. In fact, I'm going to stop the poll in 3, 2, 1. So let's stop the poll here and everybody can see the results on screen. It's pretty much a 50-50 split, right? 1 to 3 solutions, so I assume that's 2 to 3 solutions, as well as then also 3 to 5 and more than 5 being the other 50%. So this is pretty typical as we see. In fact, the industry average is between 3 to 5 different solutions and interfaces that a team or a procurement organization, a procurement professional needs to jump between and or need to ask other people to jump between to be able to actually onboard a supplier, manage third-party risk, and manage intake, and of course then inputs into the master data. Now, what Kodiak is offering is an opportunity to provide a frictionless experience related to your management of these suppliers across that particular process as well. And what I want to be able to get into is, if I remove this from the stream, is to get into a little bit more about understanding this status quo and how we can be able to start really more than anything condensing it, right? From 3 to 5 solutions down to maybe 2 solutions and then eventually maybe to an all-in-one solution if possible. So what does that status quo look like? Well, the status quo across this particular process that Kodiak covers typically looks like this. 3 to 4 different solutions, some of those being your ERP or a Microsoft suite, Excel, Outlook, SharePoint, you name it, right? Some might be, for example, siloed third-party risk management solutions, great solutions within their own right, as we just mentioned, focused on risk, focused on financial risk, industry-related risk, country-related risk, sanction-related risk, reputational-related risk, but again, spread out across the business and owned by different stakeholder groups across the business. With that being said, this back and forth creates an area that I would like to call kind of the area of friction, right? Everything from intake through to qualification, if that is jumping between 2 to 3 different surface areas, it's creating a lot of potential opportunity for error, and that would be human, but also data error. And B, of course, it's creating a lot of manual work that is drag within your team and things that, of course, is bogging your team down in day-to-day manual activities, harming them from getting more time for those more tactical and strategic activities. Now, to be able to illustrate this, what this status quo really looks like, I think that it's important that we actually take a second to look at a potential flow chart as what the status quo flow typically looks like. Now take a second to be able to take this in, right? Let's say that I am in a mid-sized business that has an engineering team and I'm 5 to 10 different people working across procurement that is then getting a request from an engineering stakeholder, right? Hey, we want to be able to work with this particular supplier or these particular 3 potential suppliers, right? They make a request to procurement in one way, shape, or form, probably via an email. The procurement team fields that particular email, and then they go about their business. They do step number 1, which is to send off, for example, the VAT and the dunce numbers to the finance and the legal and compliance teams to be able to run their risk checks and wait for them to be able to get back on that, again, via email. They then send off a code of conduct and a Excel spreadsheet or a PDF or a Word document to the supplier for their own data inputs so that they can be able to review, for example, different information. Unfortunately, the supplier doesn't get back with the correct thing. They miss a particular number. They enter in their VAT number incorrectly. And that's a little bit of back and forth to be able to finish step 1 and step 2. Now, once they have all of that information, they're moving on to the multi-stakeholder review coordinated by procurement. 5 to 10 different stakeholders across 5 different functions are pulled into the thread. The engineer stakeholder, unfortunately, during this is being left in the dark. Procurement fans out to different stakeholders across legal, IT and InfoSec, risk and compliance, ESG, quality, finance, and more. And ultimately, following quite a bit of back and forth, the check off across those different stakeholders, again, via email, using Excel sheets and Word documents and SharePoint, there is finally approval alignment. And then the beautiful thing, the procurement manual entry. So somebody that works in supplier onboarding or accounts payable, receivable, does manual ERP entry. Master data is often then keyed in via hand into the ERP. And then it repeats for every new supplier and or update of documentation. Now, here's the issue. The data and the documentation, it's put into, of course, the ERP system, but alerts on documents, contracts, and the like, they're forgotten. And when it's all said and done, it sits in a SharePoint, and the team, of course, moves on about their day. Unfortunately, this status quo is creating a lot of drag. But the question, I think, is because a lot of businesses are struggling with being able to build this business case, is what exactly is this costing the business? Well, Kodiak is able to quantify this based upon our customers and expert research across the space as to exactly what this cost of inaction is costing. And I think that this culminates in what we call the COI. A lot of people like to talk about ROI, and I think that return on investment is incredibly important. But the question also is what is doing nothing costing you? Well, as we see here, the visible costs of supplier relationship management is the headcount to be able to manage it, as well as then any software that you're going to invest in to be able to support it. What are the hidden costs, though, that are associated with the status quo, with doing nothing? Well, manual administration within your team, missed renewals of contracts that just roll over even though you wanted to be able to cancel, late shipments and poor OTD by not following up on quality and performance, disruptions and quality issues that, of course, could be able to, kind of fan out across the business and become even bigger issues across your services and products to your end customer, expired documents and ISO certifications, which opens up for different types of compliance risk, savings leakage via maverick spend, somebody just going out to buy because they're not having the right methods of intake, different types of input supplier rework because the supplier is not giving you the right information, data, and documentation from the start. There's all of these different elements that play into this silent tax that continues to tick away and unfortunately can often be quite costly. And I think that whenever we're looking at COI, it's best for us to be able to break it down into 3 distinct areas: operational COI, tactical COI, and strategic COI. And again, these slides will be offered for download in just a moment's time following the demonstration that we're going to get into in just a moment. But the thing that I think is most important here is that what we're taking away is a simple scenario. And you yourself could be able to plug your business and your scenario into this particular equation to be able to understand what, in fact, is the silent tax on your business from supplier relationship management. Well, in this scenario, we're looking at a 20-person team with about $60 million in addressable spend and $100 million in revenue. A pretty classic business with about 60% of their revenue going back into the spend. Now, the operational COI across those 20 employees with $80K fully loaded salary, they're creating 30% of efficiency loss due to manual SRM. That's for about $500,000. An additional estimation on maverick spend and contract non-compliance and slippage and leakage. Of course, another 2% on the conservative leakage rate on $57 million in annual spend. Whereas disruptions can cost millions, of course. Now, before you even look at anything within the strategic cost of inaction, because of course that is focused on a risk of a disruption that we would of course hope would not happen, but things that we absolutely know will happen, we're looking at over $1.5 million of annual costs racking up before a single disruption even lands. And this is in a business that is at $100 million in revenue and 20 people in a team. What does that look like within a business that is $1 billion in revenue and 50 people in a team? This, of course, is the nucleus to the business case for supplier relationship management, the program, and the technology. And with that being said, it's now time for us to be able to pivot into our live demonstration of the Kodiak Hub platform. And to remind everybody what we're going to be focusing in on today, it's going to be the capabilities that sit within the hub for supplier workflows, right? Information, data, document management, but also the workflows associated with approval. It's going to be intake and onboarding. It's going to be TPRM, such as the modules on the left-hand side. And what we're also going to focus in on is the outputs, the supplier scorecards, how it is that this culminates into an overall view. And the important thing that I wanted to be able to speak about before I get into the demonstration for just another 30 seconds is the importance of scorecarding. Because a lot of businesses that we speak to before we start speaking to they're looking at scorecarding as a reactive activity. Scorecards are built on a quarter by quarter or a half year basis to be able to drive some type of a QBR or a strategic performance review with a supplier. The issue is that the scorecard itself then becomes stagnant, right? It becomes a snapshot in time of what's happened historically. Scorecards otherwise should be a part of something that's built up based upon the data and documentation that is being captured throughout the life cycle in which you're managing with your suppliers. Managing this particular process, as we talked about before, and the importance of then process aligned with technology, as I mentioned, these different touch points that you have with suppliers and with internal stakeholders all create opportunities to be able to continuously capture data and documentation that feed into the 360 of the supplier scorecard. It shouldn't be a separate activity. It shouldn't be a snapshot in time that you do once in a while. It should be something that is continuously ongoing, continuously living. And this is what true relationship and performance management is. This is how you're going to be able to, of course, drive true value throughout your supply relationships. So with that being said, I want to be able to then now toggle over to a live demonstration of the Kodiak Hub platform. And I'm going to just switch over and share my screen here. So just give me one moment to be able to do so. Let's see. And I just want to make sure that everybody is able to see the screen here.
Yeah, it looks good.
All right, great. Richard, is the contrast box showing up just so that I can be able to know?
Yeah, it's in the screen.
I will close that out. Now we're good. Richard, good to go?
Yeah, good to go.
Thank you. Great. Welcome into the Kodiak Hub platform. For those of you that have not seen it before, welcome in for the first time. For those of you that have seen it prior, then, well, welcome back. The solution itself is a cloud-based one, online login. I think that we all recognize how that works. Our solution is also then very ERP agnostic and compatible. So of course, pushing and pulling data between our solution and your existing ERP is something that we do with the majority of our customers. One of the crucial landing capabilities of our solution, if I just take one step back, is our supplier map overview. This, of course, gives us a first snapshot of some of the third-party risks that might exist related to, as we see here, different type of industry-related risk, which we can, of course, zoom closer into to understand if they are in the vicinity of suppliers that we maybe have somewhere. In this case, of course, we can also be able to see particular individual suppliers. We can see their overall rating, but we can also be able to see if there is in the vicinity of those particular businesses any type of global event, corporate, environmental, financial, so forth and so on. What we also see is a contextual risk rating for the individual country or countries where we have suppliers located and or would like to maybe start sourcing from as well. So we can be able to understand what these suppliers, countries, context are looking like from a perspective of environmental, social, geopolitical, and financial risks in those particular countries. Now, if we want to, from this view, we can also then directly dive into an individual supplier scorecard. I'm going to, however, though, navigate first to our supplier list overview. And just to be able to give a quick orientation for the solution is broken down into three primary pillars. The supplier insights. This is then, for example, where you're going to be able to get insights about your suppliers, your products and services, POs related back to those products and services, categories or tiers or structures of your supplier data, as well as then also a document repository. And documents and data, of course, are also reposited in the scorecards, where you also have a snapshot of risk, compliance, ESG, quality, and performance of a supplier. Impact, we're able to impact the relationship. Manage assessments, audits, performance evaluations. Again, the elements of the life cycle that help our customers to be able to build up this 360-degree view, and the action space for managing those multi-stakeholder approval chains that our customers utilize, of course, to be able to make sure that they're in fact able to qualify and approve their suppliers before, of course, data typically pushes back into an ERP. And then the last element is, of course, an intelligence layer, which is then reporting capabilities, allowing our customers to be able to report out on category by category across risk, compliance, ESG, performance, spend, and various other things, documentation, coming up for expiry or expired, so forth and so on. We do also have a few other layers, which is then Bjorn, which is our agent. This, of course, allows us to be able to do quick searches and allows the solution to be able to do certain things for us or find particular data for us as we would see fit. I'm going to just give a quick refresh to my page so that box moves away at the bottom. What we see here, for example, is our supplier list overview. This gives us supplier information management capabilities. It allows us to be able to quickly search for new suppliers, add new suppliers as we would like to, or import data or export data. Now, if I want to be able to walk through the use case of intake, onboarding, and TPRM, that is actually best done via our capabilities within signup. So what I'm going to utilize is to show you quickly a sign-up capability, which is then a link or a form that you can be able to host on your intranet. It looks similar to this. You can be able to completely typify and configure the different data inputs or document requirements that you have of the internal stakeholder when they are then filling these things out. The internal stakeholder can come here and then determine what it is, in fact, that the supplier is going to be providing. They can put in some baseline information, data, or documentation if you would require that as well. And they can then be able to submit once, of course, all of the required fields have been filled out. Now, a lot of our customers, like I said, host this, for example, on their intranets, allowing then internal stakeholders, like that engineering stakeholder, to come here, which reduces Maverick spend, and it, of course, aligns a particular process of intake, which directly automates the send out of the request for qualification or onboarding from the supplier. Now, how does that happen? Well, the supplier data, once input into the sign-up form, lands in the list of the pending approval suppliers. And the list here, we're able to then quickly see. We can then see when a supplier has been input, as I had input earlier today, to be able to then see one particular supplier record. Now, if I want to then be able to directly issue a request to this supplier to be able to know more about them, I can be able to then manually issue an assessment, or for example, I can be able to directly link up the intake form to an ongoing assessment campaign. The assessments is broken down super simply into templates where we have a drag and drop builder where you can build based upon our out-of-the-box content or content or requests unique to your business. You run campaigns where you then utilize those published templates that you're able to then choose based upon category or type or segment of suppliers in the campaigns, as you see on screen here, and reports, which is where then, for example, the responses start rolling back in. Weighted and rated, giving us a snapshot of where a supplier is meeting our acceptance criteria and where it is that maybe they're falling out of our levels of compliance. So let's say that, for example, I want to be able to enroll a new supplier because I don't have the automated send out, which again is possible directly following the intake form. And I want to be able to directly add a new recipient. All I need to do is then go in here and say, all right, I want to be able to find my suppliers that are, for example, pending approval. I'm able to then quickly find a list of my suppliers that are pending approval. I can even just search for that individual supplier. I find that individual supplier record and I add them into this ongoing campaign. I'm able to then just schedule this out and say, all right, yep, that supplier is going to get this then, for example, today, next week, and then another email a week following. We can schedule up to 5 different emails. And the beautiful thing is that this reduces the back and forth. This reduces then us setting reminders to have to continue on with this. The system chases down the supplier for us, driving what's called a drip campaign, allowing the solution to continue to chase down the vendor until it gets a response. If it doesn't get a response, it'll continue to ask for another response. And what we see here is that all along the way, we have, as you see, different types of campaign analytics allowing us to understand, has this responder actually opened, started, responded, actually gotten back to us, so forth and so on. So what does this then result in once a supplier responds? Well, it directly then populates the supplier scorecard, filling out then, for example, how the supplier meets our requirements in the different areas that are required. It populates all of the data that the supplier has shared back with us in their interface. And beyond that, it allows us to also capture back all of the data and the documentation, whether that, for example, be ISO documentation, codes of conducts, or alike. It allows us also to be able to do things like capture documentation with expiry dates and an audit trail of when it was uploaded and who was uploaded by, which also allows then for different types of automated notification requests out to suppliers when these documents are coming up for expiry. And we can, of course, be able to set what it is that we want as far as a cadence or how long before we would like to be able to make those requests. All of these different areas, of course, are driven by our acceptance criteria for what good and bad is. But the beautiful thing is that the response that comes back from the supplier also will drive then what is called an action space. And the action space allows us to be able to have an overview of different types of onboarding or qualification flows, different types of corrective actions, different types of nonconformities. We can be able to find these actions based upon their type, or for example, based upon just a simple search. So for example, if I search for all of the supplier approvals, then I can be able to jump into an ongoing approval that's happening here of a particular supplier. Here then, for example, I can be able to see a multi-stakeholder approach to be able to check through particular areas that might be important for us. And here then I can be able to directly understand what in fact is then the areas that different stakeholders need to be able to approach. We can communicate back and forth. I can be able to step through these different sub-actions, as can other stakeholders that are involved. And everybody has a full view of the action history. What's happening, comments being made, documents being left, things being checked off or approved, all the way through to when it can be able to then finally be approved by final approvers. Again, managing all the way from the intake of the data from a supplier to an issuance of that request for qualification and onboarding to a response that is weighted and rated, giving us then a trigger from an internal perspective to then have an actual review, an assessment, and then also an approval or qualification of this particular supplier. And that, of course, would then trigger that supplier as an approved supplier, and also then, in that perspective, allow our data to be able to push back into the ERP if that is, in fact, part of our workflow. With that being said, I'm going to stop the stream of the demonstration, and I appreciate then also that everybody has now been able to see a quick demonstration of the solution. But if you're interested in seeing a deeper demonstration of the solution, do not be shy. Feel free to click the screen here to book some time to speak with one of our SRM experts. They'd be more than happy to be able to give you a view of how Kodiak Hub can be able to help. I'm sure that within that as well, they'd be able to better understand your particular use case, your particular existing process, and what it is that you could also be able to start looking at to, as we said before, eliminate, delegate, and automate with a solution like Kodiak Hub, to be able to align, of course, on a solution that works for you, but beyond that also to support in building a business case that can be able to build momentum within your business. So with that being said, I wanted to be able to pause and then toggle over to the opportunity for a Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those into the chat line now. And myself and my colleagues will be able to mark those questions, and we'll get around to them during the next 5 to 10 minutes. So please take a moment to be able to cue in any questions that you maybe have. We'll wait just a few more moments here. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in the chat line and jot them down. And again, if you'd like to book a demo with one of our SRM experts, then feel free to do so with the call to action that is on the screen right now. All right. Well, if there is no questions, then I do want to just thank everybody for your attendance. I will now also open up for the opportunity to download today's slides. Feel free to be able to download those by checking out the link that's there, and you should be able to access. You just need to put in your email address and you'll be able to download those particular slides that were presented today. If there was some models that piqued your interests, some opportunities to be able to support with your business case levers, then feel free to be able to download. We'd be happy for you guys to be able to repurpose some of the materials that were shared today during the session. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to present, and looking forward to hopefully crossing paths again in the future, whether that be at a future webinar or, for example, in a meeting with one of our SRM experts. Thank you very much for today.